Hello and welcome to Moonstone for the Amiga. I need to say a few words about the game before getting into the actual video. When this game was released, it caused a bit of an uproar because of its violence. It is violent, but because of the graphical style, I find it very hard to take it overly serious. But of course, there will always be some people who will take certain things very seriously. So if you are a sensitive soul, you may not want to watch this video. For the rest of you, I have decided to start this video with a medley of death sequences because some of them are rather funky. So on that note, I will be cutting to that next and then get started with the actual game video. Hello and welcome to the actual game video for Moonstone. The plot of Moonstone is that the druids seek from time to time a champion in order to gather a moonstone. And a said champion, if they manage to gather a moonstone, will become immortalized in quite an interesting way. So we start off by seeking out treasures in different monster layers, and as you can probably gather, we're not doing too well at the start, but we managed to get our bearings and had to beat the enemies. You will notice that on the map there will be 4 regions which has a certain theme to them, and those regions have a batch of monster lairs that you can visit and fight the monsters in. The goal is to get 4 keystones in order to enter the center bit of the map and fight the guardian, who will then reward you with a moonstone. Said moonstone will have the look of one of the phases of the moon, and if you hand in the moonstone at Stonehenge at the same phase, the same moon phase as the moonstone, you will complete your quest. So, the game itself. I'm playing it by myself, of course, but you can play this game 1 to 4 players, and each players will take taking turns. You can get involved in player-to-player combat, and of course, in that regard, you would need 2 joysticks, 1 for each player, in order to duke it out. And of course, it is encouraged if you're fighting or if you're playing against other players to try and make life miserable for each other. You have 5 lives at the start of the game, and of course, if you lose a life, you have 1 less, which makes perfect sense. But it may initially seem a lot more punishing than it really is, because you actually have quite a few ways of regaining your lives. It's just about knowing about it. First and foremost, you're starting a village 3 times during a game. You can, if you are lower than 3 life points, go back to your starting village and be restored up to 3 life points by your village druid thing. You will also have the option to buy healing, and if you buy healing at full health, you'll get extra lives, and you have an option to offer a magical item to Danu, the head druid down at Stonehenge, which will again grant you an extra life. So even though it starts out a bit harsh, you definitely have ways to compensate for it. When you're seeking out the healer, donate a minimum of 15 gold to make absolutely sure that you get the healing needed. And of course, the ability to buy magical items. I decided to buy a healing potion because that is another way to restore a life point. If you use it while you're taking damage, you'll heal yourself, but if you use it at full health, you will gain an extra life. So, one of the items we picked up was the Scroll of Protection. When we are being attacked by someone, we have the option to bail out of that fight by using the scroll. But to be honest, it's just one of the numbskull computer players that decided to go and say hi, so I didn't want to use my scroll on that. I would rather have it available to offer for an extra life in case I needed it. The computer seems to be quite adamant about fighting you, even though you are at a point where your equipment is quite powerful, and they stand no chance of beating you unless you put down your joystick controller, whatever you use, and go and make some coffee or something. When you defeat an enemy player or computer control player, you can loot one item unless you have drained them of life points. In that case, you can loot all of the items they may have, and their gold is considered an item. So if you take their gold, you cannot take any other items they may have. So if they have something interesting, go for that first and foremost. You gain experience, and depending on how many players you play, you will need between 1 and 3 experience points to gain a stat increase, and your stats available are strength, constitution, and endurance. Adding a point to your strength will cause you to do more damage. Adding a point to your constitution will give you 10 extra hit points. And adding a point to endurance will allow you to travel further on the overhead map. But this game, it comes with a bit of a sword of sharpness. Yes, please. That will do twice the amount of damage as the claymore, and that is one of the more vital items you can get. But the stat increases. I'm just going to showcase going down to the Stonehenge and offer a magic item for an extra life. Just one of the scrolls of protection will do. But games like these, at some level, encourages you to become more powerful because, of course, you want to take on the challenges. But what you will find is that the more powerful you become, the more powerful the enemies become, and they don't just become more powerful; they also start attacking instead of 1 at a time, then 2 at a time, and 3 at a time. And you will want to avoid that because no matter how skilled you may be, you can easily get stun locked, and it is very, very hard to deal with 3 enemies at any one time. There's bound to be people proving me wrong, but you're not doing yourself any favors. So even though it is possible to play a one-player game by yourself and select 4 players in order to be able to level up easily, if you start getting an awful lot of constitution and strength and endurance, you'll actually hurt yourself more than you will benefit yourself. So it is a question of the game trying to encourage you to basically beat it with the least possible upgrades. Just showcasing, by the way, that the monster layer stayed on the map because I couldn't loot the sword of sharpness, as I couldn't. I already had one. I was trying to see if I could sell it, but you can't. So going to the shop to buy the battle armor, which is the second most important item you can get, as it adds a damage reduction and a flat hit point gain. Fighting our first key to the valley. One down 3 months ago. Shall we talk technical aspects of this game? From a graphical point of view, the overhead map and the details on that are quite delicately drawn, very detailed, very clean looking. Going to visit Math, the wizard. You can speak to him. You can actually do it multiple times, but I wouldn't encourage it because he will start getting annoyed. But at least speak to him once per game in order to get some help from him. He can give you stat increases, or he can give you stat decreases if you annoy him. But he just gave me some gold, which I suppose was a bit useful. Putting a stat point into strength, just showcasing that. Anyway, as I was saying concerning the graphics, in the combat screens, the graphics is perhaps a bit coarse, but to be honest, I actually think that it helps the game. Because the game, as you've probably noticed by now, is a bit on the violent side, but the fact that the graphics is not super clean in the combat interface, it actually helps take some of the sting out of the violence. As you can see, because of our stat increases, we are now fighting 2 enemies at the same time, and you can actually get into the stun lock positions quite easily because of that. The animation quality is a bit, I wouldn't necessarily say stilted, but it could possibly have done with more animation frames, but at the same time, I think it makes it more cartoonish and less realistic. Obviously, it's a game, but I don't mind it. It's not ideal, but it works. The fighting moves are decently animated. You get a good feel for the amount of power generated by the different moves, and of course, as in all fighting games of any kind, some of them are more or less useful. But all in all, from my graphical point of view, I'm finding this game quite enjoyable, and I have no complaints in that direction. The sound design, which was made by Richard Joseph, unfortunately late Richard Joseph, but of course he was known for creating the sound design for games like Barbarian for the Commodore 64, Cannon Fodder on the Amiga, and other games of that era. But the sounds are very meaty and rewarding, groans and yelps and clanging of metal and impact of clubs and whatever else is deliciously satisfying. It feels like it's got weight or power behind it, and I find that quite enjoyable. By the way, this is another NPC. You can go and ask for help, and he decided I had too much constitution, apparently. Whatever. Fighting some trolls here, by the way, and this is where fighting multiple enemies become a bit of an issue, because trolls are very, very powerful, and you will see just how powerful they are in a moment. Splat. Ah, oh, I can take them. I know I can take them. I can. Oops. Regardless, the music is extremely well done in a thematic sense. I think the music quality, first and foremost, is very, very high, and it sets a good mood for the rest of the game. Fighting these shambling mountain lookalike wannabes, whatever, when they appear on screen, you want to be very, very careful, because they will effectively one-shot you by dragging you on the ground. And you don't want to waste too much time when fighting them in order to be able to move. So hit them twice with your head chop and then get out of the way, so the next one coming out doesn't decide to drag you down. Of course, that never happens, does it? Oops. The gameplay itself, well, either you find it very enjoyable or you won't. There's no two ways about it. It's something that applies to every game. But while I do find it enjoyable, I also find it long-term a bit samey. The combat is rewarding. Progressing through the game feels rewarding, as long as you pace yourself so you don't get stunned because you're facing too high an opposition. By the way, buying an extra Talisman of the Worm, because I'm going dragon hunting. The Talisman of the Worm will reduce the damage you take from the dragon by 50%, and it is cumulative. So I would assume that you can't actually become immune to the dragon, but damage reduction will be quite significant, and it's got a bit of a bad breath, and I was being overly cautious about it, not realizing just how much protection the Talisman, I'd say, offered me. So I was fooling around a bit too much, trying to avoid taking damage, and then I realized I could just stand in the fire, which is bad advice, because I was sort of hoping the dragon had the last of the 4 keys that I needed, but it turned out it didn't. It had an awful lot of other stuff, but not the 1 key I needed. But as I was saying concerning the gameplay, I do find it enjoyable in bursts. It's a game you can relatively easily complete if you pace yourself, but it's not something I would want to complete on a regular basis. I don't. I find it enjoyable, but to a certain point. But we are closing in on the final parts of the game. Hereby, I got the final key to the valley, and we can now go and fight the Guardian. And in that regard, you can see I have 12 experience, and we don't need to fight anything else but the Guardian, basically. So now is a good time to spend them on some stat increases. One thing I would note with the Guardian, if you lose a fight to the Guardian, you will lose 3 health points, not just 1. And don't get overly excited now. Despite the fact that we are quite powerful and got some decent equipment, he can actually obliterate you rather quickly, which will happen. I will lose 3 life points to her, but then I manage to beat her. And once you get Moonstone off her, it's just a question of stalling until the correct immune phase aligns with your Moonstone, and then go to Stonehenge and complete the game. As a whole package, I find this game to be of a very, very high quality. Some people would disagree, and they are perfectly allowed to. I have no issues with people not agreeing with me. It would be boring if we all agreed on the same things all the time. But despite the fact that it caused a certain amount of distress in certain people because of its violent nature, I do think, to be honest, I mean, people should be able to make the distinction between violence in a computer game and violence in real life, and I would argue that there is an issue lying elsewhere if people have an issue distinguishing between the two. So, but I mean, each to their own, I suppose. Better be cautious than careless, but too little and too much, I know that. But I will be shutting up while this is playing out, so I'll catch you on the other side. Thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time. Bye bye for now.